Listening audience, if you're listening on the podcast and you're not seeing the YouTube, you see me doing this crazy. You don't see me doing the crazy drum solo with the air drums when the beat comes in, but everybody else is laughing. They're also laughing probably because I couldn't unmute myself to start talking, which is it's a free podcast. You get what you pay for. Anyway, I'm Jake Wiskerson, and not with me today is Michael Sodini. So in his stead, we have Eddie Davenport. Hello, Eddie. How are you?
Doing good. How you doing, Jake?
Good, man. It's breakfast time in the West, and it's lunchtime in the East. You are in the East in North Carolina.
And the cold East too. We have a snowstorm that is left and another one coming in.
Good for you. We could use that here in the high desert. We need water. Also with us is Dylan Sessler. Hello, Dylan.
Hello. How are you guys?
Excellent. And from where do you hail?
I'm right in the middle. I'm in Wisconsin, and it's been a snowstorm for a month or so we're good.
Are you a Badgers fan?
I don't follow college football that much. With what I do, I have a lot of other time investments, so sports just really isn't my thing.
Any sports at all?
I mean, I watch mostly because my son, I'm an Eagles fan. He's a Packers fan. So he tells me all about both of them. I love soccer, but I really just, obviously here in America, you just don't see, I'm a Premier League fan. So you don't see that very often.
No, you don't. Yeah, it is hard to keep up with. Although I know ESPN's starting to cover it a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm a Cowboys fan, so this interview is going great.
I still have respect for you. I just don't like your team.
That's fine. We can respect the people. It's one of the things we say in therapy is like, you can judge the behaviors without judging the human being underneath. So, I think that fits here.
Absolutely.
Mock your team and your performances and your failures without mocking you. So welcome. Thanks for carving out time. And I'm trying to, I think, new year, new me or something like that. We're gonna announce our podcast sponsors in the beginning, not the end. Armscore has been with us for a really long time, and we're very proud to be associated with them. They put our flyers in their boxes, and now they're stamping our mental health screenings link on their ammo too, which is super cool. So thank you to Armscore. We're always looking for new sponsors, especially manufacturers from within the gun community, because that's how we reach people, right? They buy your products, it goes to millions of people all over the place, and really we just want to link people to getting their mental wellness checked. So if you want to be a part of this, reach out to us, WTTA.org. That's it for the shout outs. I mean, I guess I could self-reference and say Zephyr Wellness helps out. That's the company that I own, but enough of the self-aggrandizement. So Dylan, you connected with us because Eddie found you on TikTok, or his wife found you on TikTok, which sounds a little, I don't know if it's creepy because TikTok is for kids, from what I understand. I don't TikTok. Ticking in the talking, that sounds like something that Doc Brown would be doing in Back to the Future. But explain this background, like what you do and why you're here, for people who may not have read your bio on the little
Sure.
podcast intro slug.
Sure. Well, first off, let me address the TikTok thing, because TikTok is not for kids. It's for people. So, I started on TikTok in January of 2020, mostly because I followed a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk for quite some time, because I've always been kind of like, I want to start some kind of business. I just don't know what. And ultimately, I've had a very interesting mental health journey. And because of where I was in January of 2020, I decided that, one, I wanted to write a book, and two, I wanted to be able to sell that book. So Gary at the time was talking a lot about TikTok, and he was like, and everybody was obviously like, especially back then, we're thinking this platform's all for kids, right? And I'm like, well, Gary doesn't think so. So I'm gonna try it out. And so I started posting videos, and I'm an honest guy, right? I try to be, because for a majority of my life, I wasn't an honest guy. I wasn't an honest guy with myself. I wasn't an honest guy with other people. And so I started by just being like relatably and realistically honest about mental health, about life, about things like suicide, because I've been through many different aspects of suicide. And people just started following me. My wife actually has been tracking my progress. I haven't been, and I just hit 500,000 followers. So it's like in just about 2 years, I've gone from being someone that hated social media and not wanting to really operate on those platforms to this point where obviously I'm talking to you guys now, but I'm also known very almost intimately by 500,000 people. I have a podcast. I have a book. I have all sorts of different things. I have a business that's focused around helping people. And so I've reached people in a way that I never would have expected, simply by being honest about things that people are almost deathly afraid of talking about. And that's why, my book is aptly named Defy the Darkness, because it's talking about those dark things that we all have, thoughts of, we all have emotions about, we all have feelings of, but for some reason, there's some kind of blockage, there's some kind of stigma that says we can't have those conversations with people. And that's really, that's why I'm here. That's why we're talking right now, is because Eddie's wife stumbled upon a video of me probably talking about something that I think is important to talk about.
Yeah, I want to hear Eddie's take on this and what was attractive to him, because I'm gonna share mine first. There's a lot that I want to cover, and I hope we can get through it all. Really, it's like 3 or 4 major points, and some of them are, in my mind and in my experience, fairly contentious, at least through my professional community. But one is when he forwarded your stuff, and I was like, I just kind of scrolled your website real quick, and DylanSessler.com, by the way. 2 S's in Sessler. Actually, it's 3 S's. Sessler. But I was scrolling through, and I first thing I go to is the about page, and I want to know what's behind the banner. And your story was compelling. A lot of people's stories are, but then what you did with it in creating the company that you created so that you can reach out to people and be as honest and authentic and transparent as you are, really struck me as refreshing and necessary. And here's why I wanted to talk to you. You are doing essentially what I do, only without the credentialism, I could say, because a lot of us get caught up in credentialism and how many postnominal letters you have and how many degrees you've completed. And I've pushed back against that, which is very strange to hear from somebody who chaired his licensing board in the state at one point. I have a very different approach. I think the state stamp of approval is important. I think it gives a bare minimum, seal of competence to people. But we've got to be mindful that humanity got here for the last 40,000 years across its current iteration without our profession, right? Like, we've been around for about 100, 120 tops. So somehow humans were healing each other and themselves without my highfalutin master's degree and the blessing from the state and all the rigidity that comes with that. So I wanted to hear your story and how your success and journey has been. I mean, obviously you got some success. You got 500,000 people. My God, what a reach, by the way.
Mm-hmm. I
mean, how many people can you stand in front of in the largest stadium in the world? 100,000, and that's a lot. But like 5 times that, and how many people even get to that point? Most people think they're successful because you stand in front of a room of 120 college kids. So the reach with that message is so powerful, and I'm glad you mentioned that social media is not as always toxic as we think it is. But that was my intrigue. I was very excited. It was a no-brainer. I was like, yep, we got to get this guy on. This guy's clearly authentic. Like, he's not some grifting snake oil salesman. He's just trying to make a quick buck. So, but Eddie, I want to hear your initial impressions, please.
So first thing, I want to push back against like the TikTok for kids, because that's what I thought for a while. But now, after like my wife started sending me penguin TikToks, because penguins are the best animal on the face of the planet.
Wait, what did you call them?
Penguins.
P-I-N-G?
Oh my God. Penguins. The little fluffy white bird. The tuxedo guys.
Yes. The James
But,
Bond of the animal kingdom.
Yes, the coolest animal on the face of the planet, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise.
Oh, I don't disagree. I was just challenging your pronunciation. It's like, and my wife, she's from the Midwest. She says bag instead of bag. And
Oh my God,
like,
that's my wife too.
I was like, penguins. It sounds like they're made of metal or something.
Anyways.
Before you were so rudely
anyways.
interrupted.
So like, yeah, I got on that because of her. And then like, but at this point, for those who heard me last time, I was a college kid. Now I am the licensed therapist guy. Well, provisional licensed therapist guy.
Congratulations, by the way. That's super cool.
I would push back against the TikTok is for kids, because at this point I kind of encourage like my families and stuff to not let their kids almost get sucked in on TikTok, because of their like TikTok and Instagram. There can be a lot of negative aspects of that. So, and if you see some of the trends, but anyways, that's a whole different rabbit trail. With his thing, like we, like most married couples, we send each other like a bunch of stuff randomly throughout the day, or sitting in the bedroom or toilet, whatever you want to do, and that just happened to be one of the ones coming in. I just happened to stumble across it, and I read it, and like I said, I think I told you guys earlier that like I did a little heart thing, so I liked it, and then once you do that one time, it just constantly shows up, and he kept showing up, and I eventually just clicked on his actual bio instead of just listening to him, and went to his website, and I was like, hey, this guy seems pretty legit outside of the story. And the thing that spoke to me the most was the PTSD stuff. My story has PTSD in the background from being a EMT firefighter, and so that really spoke to me. And just the fact that like you reach out, you help people without the license. Again, like I'm very proud of my license, I'm very proud of my schooling, but like Jake said, we got here without us. While I'm here now, it's basically just because the state says I have to have these things to do what I do.
And yet we got a guy sitting with us on the screen who demonstrates that clearly you don't, right? I'm a big fan of letting the market decide and not thumping people about the head and shoulders with your, sales pitch. If you're good at what you do, people will find you. Now, that takes some time and some patience maybe, but here's Dylan. He's like, I don't have a license, like, but I'm helping people. And that's what I want to hear about. Like, how did you spur yourself into this level of conviction, I guess? And I mean, there's got to be some hesitation and some self-doubt in the beginning, and maybe even along the way, right?
Still.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely still. I mean, it's such an interesting kind of dilemma, right? Because I didn't intend to become a coach necessarily. I intended to become an author on social media. Like that was my first goal, was to sell my book, right? Because that was the story that I knew people could, read and start understanding, like, this is how I can start helping myself. And then people just kind of started following me more and more, and I had more opportunities to kind of connect with people. And what I think I offer the most is a stepping stone to more, right? Like I come at whatever I do. I call myself a mental health coach, because I need some kind of name for it, right?
Yeah.
And where people find me is they're the people that have been hurt by therapy, who have been stigmatized by therapy, who have been hurt by the mental health system in general, right? The ones who have gone to mental health institutions or mental health hospitals or emergency rooms and have been traumatized in many ways, or have been stigmatized by what is potentially able to help them, didn't or couldn't or can't, right? And however you want to phrase it, there's so many different reasons, right? And so what I found myself a niche where if people didn't find me, they were often just out of luck. They had nowhere else to go. And so what I think I've stumbled upon kind of inadvertently is a place in the whole system where I might have the ability to kind of help people, guide them to the knowledge that your profession has really built for us. But at the same time, package it and deliver it in a way that actually speaks to these people that have been either harmed or stigmatized by this system. So it's
catalyst.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm a person that has been through it, right, in many different ways. Like what I don't think I've been through anything extraordinarily hard, right? Like I'm not Marcus Luttrell sitting on a mountaintop trying to crawl 7 miles to a village to get help, right? I don't think what I've been through has been particularly like difficult in that way. It's been traumatizing, absolutely. It's been there's been many things in my life that have been hard, very hard, but what I've been through is a plethora of things that have allowed me to see the perspective of what it means to actually overcome. And I've tried to put that right in my book, in my content, and everything that I kind of live to tell the story of. I try and put it in real terms that people can understand. I'm not going to spit crazy amounts of, big words at you trying to make you think I'm smart. Like I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to be the translator for what you're feeling and what might be the opportunity for you to heal, for you to overcome, for you to develop yourself, and then also to help you kind of create the boundaries within yourself, create the structure within yourself to understand how to actually operate within your environment, operate as a human being, and to help you recognize what's your normal versus what the normal is outside of yourself. Because oftentimes what I found is that those are two very different things for people, is that they don't have the operating knowledge to understand that the world around them doesn't fit who they are. And so they've diverged their identities to be like, I'm this person to, everyone around me, but I'm inside, I'm slowly self-destructing because I don't know how to express that part of myself.
A lot of that goes on with teenagers these days too.
It goes on with everybody, right? Like that's such a normal thing, especially when we don't know how to process trauma, when we don't know how to process emotions, right? It's not even trauma, it's emotions, because like, if people don't know how to express the very simple, reality that's within them, and kind of build this recognition of what's actually normal, what's actually sane, if they don't have that backboard to kind of bounce ideas off of, it's simple. It's going to be a struggle, and that's where people ultimately, I think, from what I'm seeing, and I'm, I come at this from a place of, I don't know what I don't know. And I think that's why people really like me, is because, I might change my mind and reverse, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being wrong. And that's where, we talk about where I'm at on TikTok and where I'm at with, everything that I'm doing, is that there's this, dilemma that I have to face of, I'm just a coach. I'm just a mental health coach. I'm not a professional. I don't have all the knowledge. I don't have the state board behind me. I don't have people behind me. I have people in front of me trying to listen to me and trying to understand me. And so I have to be very willing to say, I don't know, and be okay with that, because there's people that don't like what I'm doing. There's people that do like what I'm doing, and kind of figuring out where I fit in that balance, and if this is all okay for me, is a difficult task for sure.
I mean, part of it, I think, is your story resonates. You're, as a child, like you had a parent who committed suicide, then growing up with the anger and the almost guilt that came from that, of like what, and then not knowing how to express yourself. And then it turned into like, you made yourself like, this is all it is about me. And I'm sure he'll go farther into that, but made yourself the promise, like, I'm not going to commit suicide. I'm not going to do that. But you chose reckless paths, and your reckless path was going into the military and wanting to die. So, but like, hey, if I go in the military and I die there, I still didn't commit suicide, but I got my ultimate goal. And I think that resonates with people, because while there's a lot of people out there who like, I'm not going to kill myself, but I'm going to take so many adverse risks, or I'm going to take all these risks in my life that if I end up dead, then so be it. I think that this resonates with people. There's times in my life, I think I did that. Like, I know there's 100% house fires that I went into that I probably shouldn't have been in. I probably should have pulled out quicker.
Yeah. I mean, it's everything I try and talk about is relatable, because the human experience is that, right? Like we're meaning making machines. And if we don't if we don't, or if we aren't structured to like create some form of positive meaning, we'll create negative ones. And so, I'm sure Jake and Eddie, you both have probably dealt with this situation on, a grand scale with the people that you talk to. But it's, if you're not taught by your parents, if you're not taught by the school, if you're not taught by your friends how to create meaning, well, then you're going to have a bad outcome. I mean, I don't see people that have that knowledge fundamentally built into them as a kid. I don't think I've ever met someone that had that meaning kind of developed for them as a kid. Like, oh, my father taught me this about what it means to actually overcome, because no one knows how to actually package it up and put it into a box that people can understand. Psychology is trying. I think they've been trying for, the past 200, 300 years of, now that we're starting to understand the brain, but it's just not that simple. And even me, like, I'm looking at it and there are people that will read my book and not get it. And that's where I'm going, is like, my direction is wholeheartedly trying to figure out how to take what we have, begun to understand and translate it into a formula of sorts, or some kind of idea that we can start to give to people to start creating meaning, to start creating, logical and rational thought, to provide a better outcome for them. And it's hard, nothing about this process is easy.
Do you listen or read or read any of Jordan Peterson?
Oh yeah, that's one of the reasons, like, or one of the things that I'm talking about, like sanity. Sanity is a social institution. That comes from his most recent book.
Mm-hmm.
I love what Jordan Peterson does, because, people don't understand him. He's an academic, so he doesn't have, like, he certainly has bias, but he is not about like diving into the bias. He's about understanding how to move the ball forward. And that's kind of what academia does, is it's trying to move the ball forward in how we build theoretical understanding of the world, especially psychology. So,
well, it used to be, that's what it's ideally for nowadays. Right. I think there's more teaching what to think and less how to think, but yes. Where I was going with that was the meaning making. And I think one of the frustrations with finding meaning is that it's so highly individualized that what makes it seem challenging is you can write a book like yours or like his, and it hits everybody differently. And I think back to there was an inscription that my aunt put into Norman Vincent Peale's book. I can't even think of the title, but she gave it to me when I was 16 years old. She wrote, "Read this now, but then read it again when you're an adult, and then read it again later when you're an older adult, and it will change meaning every time." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." And I didn't really know what she meant. Now I do. I'm in my 40s, and I get it. And I think that our job as people who see others hurting, right, and we want to bring healing and help, first we got to ask them permission. That's rule number one. Gain consent before you start telling people what to do. But then we want so badly to help them see what they can't see, that we think that our way of seeing it is going to match their way. And that's not always the case. And so I think that why it seems so hard and why this is such a heavy lift is because something that's apparently brilliant for 25 people may not be for the next 3 or 4. And you go, what is it? And I think the way that you get through it, honestly, is you just read more, you listen more, you learn to put up boundaries and limits, and you learn to know where your rumble strips are on the highway, so to speak. So you start drifting a little bit this way, you can pick up a different book or a different podcast or a different mentor, and they'll guide you back. And then you start to drift a little bit too far to the other way, and you pick up something else, and eventually you're on your own path. Right? It's not somebody else's path. It's not your mentor's path. It's not the podcast host path. It's your own. But the only way you learn that is by listening and observing and watching very, very carefully, and with a lot of humility and curiosity, all the people around you, preferably the ones you respect, parents, teachers, clergy, administrators, instructors, bosses, all those things. And eventually we end up with our own individual paths. Now, I think at the core of that is something common. And I, Carl Jung would call it a divine spark. But whatever it is, I think that's what we want to try to reach into with people and say, you can be more than you are, more than you see, and it is good, right? That's at the end of the day, that's where we want people to go, because who wants hurt and pain, So I think it's commendable that you're on this journey and you're taking the approach that you are, which is a very one down, humble, curious, but continually progressing search for truth and meaning. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's I step into this, and I always have, I think, with the understanding, you said something very interesting, is you have to ask people's permission or their consent, right? And it's interesting because obviously TikTok, when a TikTok video, Eddie, you can attest to this, when a TikTok video comes up, there's no permission, right? Like when my video comes up, I'm speaking like directly to your soul. So like there's a moment where I never ask permission, right? I'm just there, right? And that's the interesting thing about TikTok, is that you gave your consent to TikTok, but you didn't understand what you were consenting to.
Right.
But what I've learned is that you cannot speak to people that do not want to hear you. And so when I'm doing my thing on TikTok, I'll get comments of people like denoting what I do and downplaying what I do, or, calling me all sorts of different things, right? And many colorful words. And then I'll get thousands of people that love what I do, right? And this is the life of a content creator and an influencer, but you can also see that there are people that are willing to understand, and there are people that are not, right? I see, and I'm sure Eddie, you can attest to this as well, is that there's people that will create videos, sad videos, very sad videos and sad stories, and share how they're feeling in the moment, but also are not ready for help, not asking for help. They just want to express themselves. And so like, I've reached out to people like that before and never gotten anything back. But at the same time, I put myself out there, not asking for people's permission, right? And they come to me. And so there's this interesting thing, and I think it's important to talk about, that social media is, I'm kind of like building this theory in my head, that, this macro level of cultural transformation that social media is really implementing. I think the internet really started it, but social media is really kind of manifesting it, is that identity is becoming such an intricate thing. It was always an intricate thing within us, but now identity is becoming almost transcendental within social media. And so it's becoming really easy for people to see social media, right? See different content and find communities, and then build within themselves meaning and identity. Whether that's good or bad is not really the question. This is just like the theoretical understanding. But they're building this meaning and this identity off of whether it's real or not is a really interesting question. And that's one of the reasons why I try to be real, obviously, to give people a real understanding of the world. But I think social media is becoming a lot more influential than we might think. Certainly people like to say it's toxic, but I think what I have offered and what I do is a way of understanding how it can be used for good. And it begs so many questions within obviously your profession of how do we treat people that also have the ability to help people but don't have credentials, because that's a huge question. It begs so many questions in terms of how we educate people, because far more people are learning more off TikTok than they are in school. I promise you that, right? Like there, you look at 30-year-olds, look at millennials on TikTok. and look at their content, look at what they've, what they've watched, and you'll see I've learned more, I've learned more about my family situation from, certain TikTokers than I ever have in school, than I ever have, right? Like how to actually manage a family or see a family or, perceive what my family life was, whether it was normal, abnormal, unhealthy, healthy, and recognize the problems that I had to face as a kid, right? Like that's who I see the most. And, I've broken into a huge market of like 30 to 55-year-olds. And now I'm starting to see kids, right? And there's 15, 16-year-olds that are contacting me and trying to work through these issues. And it's a really interesting, do I have all the answers? No, but it's a really interesting situation to be in.
Well, part of that with the social media aspect is it can be toxic, but you have to ask yourself, why is it toxic? It's generally because of like the negative aspects and the negative outcomes that come from these micro communities. But the aspect of like finding your own people, that can't be overstated. I mean, I used to live in southeastern North Carolina, which was a very poor rural area. And imagine growing up in that area and being gay and like thinking, okay, there's something wrong with me. I'm the only person out there that's gay. I have these feelings, and if I talk about it, I'm going to get the crap beat out of me. But then, like before the internet, that was it. You're stuck in this small little town. But now, because like the internet and social media, you can find like, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing. There are people like that had these same thoughts or the same communities, and that's just one small story of the. And like, I mean, you could look at it with me, like all my friends, we all live halfway across the United States from each other because social media, we all get to hang out every day because at Sunday or every week at Sunday. So like there's multiple things. We each find our own community, find our own thing. And like with what you do, the ability to like reach out and talk to someone, and also like it's a 3-minute video. Like so like you're not asking someone to devote months or hours of their life. Well, to read a book or read like even listen to an hour-long podcast. It's 3 minutes, and like if you don't catch them the first 10 seconds, they're generally just scrolling through. So like, you catch them, you hook them, and then you give them the content, and then before they know it, the video's over. And so like that kind of fast pace in your mind out the other kind of thing is in a sense kind of how fast paced like society is. But at the same time, we're learning, we're growing, and it's kind of like you found your niche in this.
Yeah.
Do you have any concern about when you engage with the kids about blowback or liability from the parents if they find out and they go, "What's this old guy doing talking to my teenager?"
Absolutely. I have those thoughts with everyone, right? Because one of the biggest things that I've dealt with over especially the past year, because I didn't really get into it in the first year, is even like domestic violence, right? Like this isn't just a kid thing. This is throughout life. And that's
Right.
why it kind of leads me to understand like, these concepts of like things like dominance, right? And violence, right? I've always I'm a sociologist by nature. I got a degree in sociology, and then I went for my master's. I didn't finish it because I got deployed to Afghanistan. And so I look at like I'm theoretical, right? I'm building this kind of understanding of violence and how it's implemented, how people operate with it, and how people kind of use it in their day-to-day interactions. And so, certainly I'm worried about how parents view it, but at the same time, hold on, can I swear? Am I allowed to do that?
Oh shit! What do you think?
Yeah, fuck it, go ahead.
I got my answer. Quite frankly, because I know what I do is right, in my mind. I don't step outside the lines of professionalism with what I do, because that's my integrity. I just don't give a fuck. Like I've been to Afghanistan twice. I've been in much, I've been in terrible situations. Obviously I have a family, and that's something that matters to me, but what are you going to do? Right? Like, are you going to sue me? Okay. That's fair. I'll see what I can do with that. But if that's what I'm worried about, or if violence is what I'm worried about, I just don't give a fuck, because I know what I'm doing is more beneficial to someone than it is detrimental to me. And someone has to stand up to people at some point, right? You have to take a stand for what is wrong in the world if you know what it is. And that's not easy. I haven't necessarily faced any blowback yet, but I've been close, right? Like the wrong thing comes out, and I know it's probably going to happen. But it has to come out, right? And that's what I think social media can be really beneficial with, is that, right? It's not a right where I'm asking your permission to tell you you're wrong. It's in your face. Here's what's wrong with society. And over time, you're not going to change people overnight. You change people over time, right? And if you look at the year 2000, and then you look at the year 2022, where we are now, and you look at how domestic violence, how child abuse, how anything involving violence has been discussed, suicide, right? Let's talk about just suicide. In 1996, when my dad committed suicide, the discussion was with me was, this man is now going to hell because he committed suicide. He was a sick man. And like,
You were probably told he was selfish.
yeah, he was selfish. And now 2022, I'm looking at this same situation, and I'm like, he was both selfish and selfless, because there's proof as to both. He wasn't a sick man. He was destroyed by the family that was supposed to protect him and keep him safe. And he wasn't supported. He wasn't, there were so many things to look at this. This wasn't a sickness. This was a construction. And so, how I look at it is, I just don't give a fuck, right? Like,
this is music to my ears, Dylan. When I was bemoaning the licensing thing earlier, it's because I was listening on, you can't see this, but I'm putting my hand about a quarter of an inch away from my nose. And I said, I was this close to everything regarding licensing in Nevada. And I understand we're Nevada, we're podunk. But the point is, when you get that close to a profession and you see everything and you go, oh my God, I don't know that we're helping, especially when you're in Nevada and you're 51st in the country for like the 11th year in a row in behavioral health provision and care. I worry about the lawsuit, right? If the lawsuit comes, I lose my license, quote unquote, put that in air quotes, lose my license. And then what? I can't practice, quote unquote. And then I look at you and I'm like, you're doing what I do, and probably doing it better because you're doing it freer. You don't have to worry about the overlords of the profession judging whether or not you fit their construct of what is or is not ethical. Yep. And of course, our ethics are embedded into law, and that provides some protections for the consumer. I don't argue that at all. It gives them a baseline of what to expect. Not that anybody reads this stuff anyway or even knows what to expect, which is why I do the videos and podcasts I do, to go tell people what they can expect from counseling, right? But it's great to hear you say, I don't give a rip about doing the right thing because it's the right thing, and truth resonates with people and it penetrates the soul. And what are you going to do? Okay, let's take this in front of a judge and see what the impartial decider says about your accusation of me doing the right thing. Like, that's how I operate. And is it a hard sell? Fortunately, I have a staff now that like totally gets it, and they're on board, and they're like, we love you as a boss, right? But it's a hard sell. So I appreciate the heck out of what you're doing, because it resonates with me and it cheers me on, and it makes me feel really good. The longitudinal analysis of what's been going on conversationally with regard to very sensitive subjects is very important too. Violence against women and just how we talk about women has evolved since I was in college in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's a point of pride with me to be a part of that. I hate the right side of history phrase, because I think that's so subjective, but it is like there is a clear delineation of what is right and wrong. And I'm glad that places like my fraternity don't talk the way they do anymore, or they did anymore nowadays. So, it's things like that. I love that you're saying that, but I want to get back to suicide because you are an attempt survivor, and I want to hear that story if you don't mind sharing, because I think it's instructive to the audience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me lay some groundwork for you. Obviously I talked about my dad, and, my dad committed suicide when I was 6. And you have a little bit of context of why he might have. We don't actually know, obviously, because we never got a letter. We never got any kind of expression of it, but you put 2 and 2 together and you start paying attention to the story, and you don't need to wonder why anymore. But I had to, right? And that's where I started. That's where all of it started, was at 6 years old. All of a sudden, I come downstairs and I look at my dad and my mom and my sister all standing there. And my dad looks at me, and he kind of looks at all of us, but he looks at me and he says, I'm going to a meeting, and I don't think I'll be coming home tonight. Right. And all of my intuition and all of my instincts went off. Right. And this moment of, my body told me that's not true. Nothing about that statement was true. I knew it. Right. And this overwhelming sensation came over me to say, don't go. Right. And don't leave. And I did. And at 6 years old, like, that's uncontrollable in many ways, because at that age, you don't have any control over your emotions. You're learning it. And so, I hugged him. I remember grabbing his leg and telling him not to leave. And it was that cliche kind of moment where he pulls me off of him, tells me he loves me, and then, like, walking out the door and turning left. I remember that. And that sat with me for so long, right? That moment, it's been something that I've always thought of. And throughout my childhood, that's all I could obsess about, right? Eddie kind of talked about it earlier, is that it was guilt. It was such a profound guilt because I didn't know how to have the conversation. I always thought it was my fault that he made that choice, because I didn't stop him, because I was a kid and I didn't understand how to actually structure that thought, how to structure guilt and how to structure shame. And obviously, when people started telling me, this man's going to suicide, this man committed suicide and he is going to hell, he was a sick man, that created shame. Like, that's my dad. That's a man that I love and I've looked up to for 6 years, and even after his death, I looked up to him, and I didn't know that much about the situation. I knew that he was an alcoholic. I knew he was, he did drugs. He chain smoked like a chimney. And so, like, that's where this all came from, is that I looked at that situation, and at 7 and 8 years old, Eddie talked about it. I said, I will not smoke. I will not drink. I will not do drugs, and I will not commit suicide, because those were the 4 things that I saw visually that ruined my dad's life. But I didn't understand all of the rest of the information that was missing. There was so much context that was missing that I created 4 rules that may have been good for me, but were also, in a way, kind of misinformed. There wasn't enough information. And so I made those rules in secrecy. That was within myself. That was my identity being created. I didn't make any rules about shame or guilt or regret. And so I lived with that. And I didn't know how to talk to my mom. I didn't know how to talk to my sister. And I emotionally lived with that. And then the next man that came into my life beat me, right? Everything I did wrong, beat me, right? There wasn't a discussion. There wasn't an explanation. There wasn't this is how these feelings manifest. And this is how this is how you can deal with them. It was, you did something wrong, bend over, right? And I would get hit by a Western style belt that was, as thick as you could get, from the small of my back down to my calves, right? And there were days where I couldn't sit down when I went to class. It was like playing that game of, like, sitting on my hip, because that was the only comfortable thing for me. And obviously that just created, that just hardened that that necessity for shame, that necessity for regret and guilt. And then it also created this this willingness to take the pain. Right. I very much remember that. I remember the day. I couldn't tell you the date or anything, but I remember the moment when he hit me and I thought about, I'm not giving you the satisfaction of me crying. I remember that like it was yesterday, and that's something I haven't actually talked about in a while. And that's really powerful for me. That's a moment of realization right there, is that I remember that moment so vividly that it became a manifestation of who I needed to be from that moment on. Is I couldn't give people the satisfaction of knowing that they were hurting me, because in many ways that was a creation of how my dad responded. It was that grieving process of, I was fucking angry at this man for what he did, and he never explained it. And now I'm here in this situation taking all this pain, and I was like, you know what? Fuck that. I'm not feeling this anymore. And so that clearly led me to, I was bullied in high school, and that was, it's the same thing. It's just like more of it. And it clearly led me to, I'm going into the military because, one, I don't want to be bullied anymore. I don't want to be hit anymore. If anybody's going to hit me, I want the ability to fight them back. Right. And it's a way for me to also potentially die in a glorious and honorable way. Right. And did that make any damn sense? No, it didn't. Right. But it made a whole lot of sense to me then, because I think, I say this to my clients all the time, is like, rationality is when you look at your emotions, everything you've ever felt in your life is rational. Is it logical? No, not always. Right. Rarely, honestly. And so it was rational for me to join the military, because it was a way of ending my life without actually ending my life myself and doing what my dad did. And so I deployed. I volunteered for deployment as much as I could for the first 3 years, and finally got it in 2012. Went to Afghanistan, saw some really hard stuff. I saw a lot of casualties coming off a Black Hawks. I was the flight line kind of director. I don't even know what the job title was. I just kind of directed helicopters to go to one of like 4 pads or 3 pads. And medevacs came in all the time with Afghans and Americans every once in a while. But I saw some crazy stuff. I saw a dude walking around with half a skull, like walking. They had bandages over it, but you could clearly see that there was a line missing of cranium, and he was walking and talking. He was an Afghan, and I'm just like, how? That's when I learned human beings are tough animals. And many other things. Many things happen on deployment that you're just like trying to process it is crazy, right? The change in general is enough to make people struggle, right? Just the extreme changes from going from America to Afghanistan, Iraq, Kosovo, like all sorts of different places. And then you come home and it's just like a different world again. And that's what happened to me. Is I tore my ACL like 3 days after I got back from Afghanistan. They sent me to Fort Knox a couple weeks later. So after a difficult deployment like that, I went to a place where I was completely isolated. My roommate he had such bad PTSD that he had and brain damage that he had to wear glasses, and he had to keep everything dark because any light would make him basically like angry, go into seizures. He had broken his leg, broken his back. He was an angry man. Right. And so I just stayed away, and I just stayed in my room. And for 23 hours a day, I was awake, just thinking. And obviously that's not a good thing when you have just been through all of the stuff that I've expressed already. And it came down to, I just wanted to get out of that place. I got out of that place and learned a bunch of stuff that was really important to me, but it put me home in a different kind of isolation. An isolation that I think is almost more dangerous, is where there's people you love around you, but you're unwilling to actually create connection.
Uh-huh.
And so when I lived in that environment and very small things and even big things kind of went wrong, that's when, one day I was at class and I had just broken up with my girlfriend. It was like just trying to figure out love for the first time. I told myself in class, I'm done with this. And so I drove from Whitewater to Janesville, where I lived at the time. It was about a 20-minute drive, sobbing, right? Just absolutely sobbing, because I was tired of all the bullshit happening to me. I was asking all the question, why is this happening to me? All that stuff. And I get home, I put my stuff in my room, and I open up my safe and I pull up my Glock 34. And it at the time was loaded with 22 rounds. I had extended mags and everything. I'm a competitive shooter, so I have really nice guns. And I picked up that one, and I took all the rounds out, magazine and everything, except for one. And it's interesting that I found it. Actually, I keep that right next to me.
You still have the round?
I do. Yep.
Holy shit.
I remember putting it in a drawer, and I found it one day and I put it away, and I saved it, and it's crazy. It's this one. And I put that gun, I went upstairs into the hallway. I don't know why I picked the hallway. It's like, thinking back, I have no idea why I did the things that I did, but I picked the hallway. I sat down and I just laid out all the rounds, put the magazine down, and I was like, this is it. I sat down. I put the gun right below my ear, kind of right behind my ear, because that's where the medulla oblongata is. That's the shutoff switch. Obviously, I've been in the military for 14 years now. I know how to kill people, and I knew effectively how to kill myself. And I didn't want to feel anything. So I was like, this is going to be it. And I don't know what held me in that moment. I know I pulled, my Glock is very fine tuned. It's probably got a 2.5 to 3 pound trigger, and it's butter smooth. And I pulled that had to be within a millimeter, because I pulled a long way. And it didn't go off. And in that moment, there was that moment where I stopped and I was like, is this it? Is this what you want to do? And I started, all those thoughts kind of came flooding back in of like, what if you just don't know? And that's what, I've been thinking about this last couple of months. What if you just don't know? And I stopped. I put the gun down. I'm honestly in tears. I'm a blubbering mess, just crying. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what don't you know? What don't you understand? And I started asking myself those questions of like, what brought you here? Because I've always been a why guy. I've always been at first it was, why did my dad commit suicide? Why did this person hurt me? Why did this person bully me? I asked all those questions of people outside of me. And that was the first day, I think, I recognized, why did I do this to me? Why am I here? And I started asking the questions that mattered. And that's a remarkably honest thing to do. And one that most people can't. And if you want to know, if you want to know where my conviction came from, it's that.
You're sitting with a couple of therapists here. We're not going to bail you out of this moment, but unfortunately it's a podcast, so it's not a therapy session. We probably should bail.
No, you shouldn't.
This is
dig deeper.
This is so good, Dylan. Like, I'm getting watery eyed. I really got teared up when you were talking about when you were 6, because I have it. Now I'm going to do it. I have a 6-year-old. He grabs me by the leg, and when I go to work, he says, "Don't go, stay home." Sometimes. That really hit me. But hearing you, when you said asking the questions that mattered. I wonder how many of us out there really honestly do that, right? And really honestly, and I don't mean on the surface, and I don't mean performatively, but I mean honestly, ask questions that matter, because that is a scary thing. And I love that you talk about emotions. I do emotional functioning for a living. I don't think that's a secret to anybody. That's so scary. It's a deeper fear. It's a deeper, more impactful fear than anything of the world could scare us. Because when you talk about fear, we talk about it represents a threat or a danger. Threat or danger of physical harm is not the same as emotional harm or psychological exploration. When you can touch the infinite potential within yourself, the possibilities behind that are terrifying, because it's not just for good, it's for terrible as well. Yeah. And I think so many of us don't ask those questions simply because they're we don't want to face the fear. And usually that's because we haven't, right. We haven't practiced it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eddie.
So we don't ask the why behind. We don't, and the asking why is this happening to me is not the right question. It's what brought me to this place. What is next?
Yes.
God, that the story of the gun, it hits me, man. Okay, mom and dad, if you're listening to this, you don't know the story. When I was 17, I had the same thing, this gun to my head, and the phone rang. For some reason, I answered the phone, and that trigger should have gone off. So I don't know how it didn't. And the phone went off. It was a friend. We talked for hours, Brian. So man, that story is, it's the only thing. Like Jake, I know you're Christian, and I know you know me. I believe in a God, but I don't know what's. That's the only thing I could explain. It's like it was a God behind that stopped it to solve something later down the line. It's like the why behinds of what brought you to this place, and man, we got 3 blubbering messes on the podcast right now.
It's good though. I think this is really good because if there's other dudes listening, it gives them permission to be like this, right? Yeah. We're all bearded, manly men, I guess, if you get leverage the archetype. And if we're allowed to be emotionally authentic, then maybe it'll invite other people to be emotionally authentic too. Because I truly believe that's what unlocks the path to peace, is when you can be emotionally authentic and allow emotion to flow through instead of getting stuck or being avoided or bailing out or rationalizing in a way or explaining in a way. If you could just embrace it and sit in it and push through and know that on the other side, you're going to be okay for the next emotional experience. That's what living is, really. Yep. So I appreciate both of you guys. My God, Eddie, I didn't know that story. But to that point about, did God intervene? Did God come down and stop those motherfucking bullets? Pulp Fiction fans, anybody? I don't know. But even that can be unsatisfying, because the concept of divinity is so abstract that it's like, all right, yeah, sure, God stopped it. Okay, now why? Yeah. Why did God keep you here?
Yeah.
And that's a terrifying question too, because it commands an accountability and a compulsion almost to do something now.
Yeah.
You didn't just save you to be a beating heart and a piece of flesh wandering the earth. Now you have to attach meaning to circle it all back to the original topic. And finding that meaning can be a lifelong journey, and that's a very long time. And if you're into instant gratification, that could be pretty frustrating if you're trying to find meaning across a lifespan.
Right.
I wanted to ask.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask.
Today's.
Stop it. All right, go ahead.
I was saying today's society, like instant gratification, that's it's so hard because that is everything. I mean, you're TikTok famous, and that is instant gratification.
It is. I realize I'm a walking irony at times, is because TikTok is instant gratification, but at the same time, I openly talk about not doing that.
That's the Zubin Damania, who's a guy I follow. He goes by ZDog MD. He produces some amazing content. Got his traction years ago by doing parody videos, singing, rapping, very high quality, but he'd take popular songs, change the lyrics to apply to healthcare. And he's very, holds the line, kind of accountability guy. Very clever, very intelligent. And when the pandemic hit, he pivoted. He still does videos from time to time, but he pivoted to being a leader in the healthcare community, and he sparked this alt middle movement. And he's really clever. But he said that some time ago. He's like, I'm sitting here banging on social media saying, get your kids off social media, but there I am, because I know that's where I'm going to be the most effective. And it's like, yeah, I know, we have to kind of embrace that and be both, right? I wanted to ask you though, very early on, you said, I want to be honest because I wasn't honest in the earlier in life. You might explain that a little bit, because I think we all kind of understand, but maybe we don't.
Well, my mom and my sister, obviously, we all went through something very, very traumatic together. That grief is really profound in a family, and it wasn't their fault that this happened. It was mine, right? Like it was just it's how the cards fell, and it was how the environment and the things around me kind of taught me to perceive the world. But when people would ask me, are you okay? I wouldn't give them an honest answer. I've never given an honest answer until 2015, when I put that gun to my head. I wouldn't give people an honest answer. I was fine. I was good. I was okay. Right. There were times where I would actually say I'm angry, but I would never say I'm thinking about my dad and how he committed suicide right now. I never would say I want to die, because I knew, in many regards that no one would know how to handle that. I knew in many regards that people were not qualified to handle that. Right. And I went to therapy a couple times when I was a kid. My mom took me there, but quite frankly, I didn't feel the people that I met were qualified to understand what it felt like as a 6-year-old to go through that experience.
I'm really glad you said that, by the way. Excuse me for interrupting, but I was about to say, many of us in our field aren't qualified to handle it. We say we are because we got our licenses, but I'm so glad you hit on that, because it's not to invalidate anybody, but like if you're not comfortable talking to somebody, you're not gonna be honest with them.
Right. Yeah. And it's, you talk about this idea of honesty, and it's so important. I've learned this, I think, so much, is that I don't want to tell people I know how to help them. Right. I don't know if Eddie, if you've seen this kind of with following for as long as you have with me. But I don't tell people I can help them. I don't tell people I can fix them or save them. Yet people tell me all the time, you've saved my life. You've helped me change. You've done all this. I'm like, I have done nothing but share my experience. I've done nothing but show you what I have been through, or the knowledge that psychology has taught me, or whatever this book taught me. I've shared this with you. And the person that saved your life was you, not me.
You normalize it. You normalize it. You show them that, hey, it's okay to admit these feelings.
Yeah. And it's this concept of, and I think, I don't know if it's your profession or not. Like, this is just what I've seen, is that people want to help people, right? There's this overwhelming desire for empathy, right? We want to be able to understand what you've been through and be able to be the ones that help you overcome, right? And in a way, you're taking what I think, and this is an opinion, maybe people disagree, but I think when you do that, when people give you the thanks and the gratitude and the gratefulness for you saving their life, you're taking away the very thing that they need to put within themselves to really create the meaning, to really understand what they've been through, right? Like, no one saved my life. I did, right? I thought about my mom. I thought about my sister. I thought about my family and my friends and the people around me, but no one made the choice to stop my finger from moving. No one made the choice following, kind of going back to your question, over the next 3 days of thinking about the questions I asked myself of, where did I go wrong? Why did I become this person in this situation? And that in starting to understand that I had an inability to express myself. I had an inability. That's why I continued to say that story. And I didn't want you to bail me out, because it is so fundamentally important for me to continue down that path of doing what's right for myself, is expressing myself, is sharing my story. Even when I know it's fucking hard, people need it, right?
Yep.
And not just, I don't do it for other people. I do it fundamentally, right? Like, this is the important thing. I do it for me, right? Because if I don't express, I know what happens. My dad showed me, I showed me, right? And so
Yeah,
it's so fundamental to not take that. I think for me, it's fundamental for me to not take that gratification from people, right? It's so fundamentally important for me to build gratification within myself and to help other people build gratification within themselves, right? I think, in this entire thing that I've learned over the past 2 years, I think there's 3 things that people need the most. They need a healthy form of these 3 things: self-correction, self-appreciation, and conflict resolution. When you can create a trinity of those things that is healthy and balanced, when you can look at yourself and say, I did this wrong, how can I do it better? Or say, that's okay, I can make mistakes, right? Or understand that this is a mistake I do need to feel guilty for, and provide a healthy amount of guilt, and not an overabundance of guilt and overabundance of regret. And then also, on the contrary, be able to self-appreciate yourself, to look at yourself and say, I did a good job. I tried my best here, and create a healthy amount of that. Too much of that is narcissism, right? Too much of that is certainly a bad thing. And so it's a balance of creating this internal identity of self-correction and self-appreciation, and then kind of forming that through conflict resolution, right? Like having a conversation like, Jake, I disagree with you. And you explaining that to me and offering the ability to listen to you, but also pushing my courage to respond to you, right? It gives us a way of, okay, Jake has an interesting perspective here that I might be able to learn from. It's not, I disagree with Jake. He's an asshole. I don't ever want to talk to him again, right? Because that doesn't provide anything. And it goes back to, you can do this with your parents as well. It's like, there's some things you don't have to have conversations with your parents about. You know where the conversation is going to go. And so it's understanding how to resolve those conflicts that are unresolvable, not because of you, but because of them. And building all 3 of those together has really been what has allowed me to get to this point now of creating that identity within myself, and then also being able to help people, because I know I'm not here to take your thanks or take your gratitude or take your, I'm not your fucking savior, right? Like I may be there for you. I may be the one you come to. I may be the content you follow, but I'm not your fucking savior. You are. You always are, because you are the only person responsible for your life. You're the only person that's going to be there for yourself 100% of your life. And if you don't recognize that, then you're building within yourself a structure that is so reliant on other people or other things, right? We talk about God, right? That once that's gone, once those people are gone, once that structure is gone, crisis. And I don't like that, right?
and
Certainly we're dependent
said.
on people, right? But how much is very important, I think. Sorry to interrupt, Eddie.
No, I was interrupting. I was just saying, well said. The basis of our profession, if you're being honest with yourself, is that the laying out the path for someone else to find it themselves. But like in the end, they have to say it themselves. Like you provide them the tools, you provide them the meanings, you show them the things, you help them understand the things, understand the what's going through. But in the end, they're the one that has to make the work. Like you. What's the thing they tell you in grad school? I think is like you can't care, you can't do more work than your client or whatever. It's like they're the ones that have to do the work. And like that's so well said.
Yeah. And we want to be mindful of not creating a dependence too. And I hate the pop culture codependent thing. It's not a thing. It's a pop psych term. Codependence isn't even a thing. You have dependence, you have independence, and you have interdependence. And interdependence is what we strive for as community members and tribal adherence and not that sort of thing. Independence is impossible. Dependence is unhealthy. So, professionally, we don't want people coming back to us thinking that we're responsible for their outcomes. That's something that Conti would call the error of omnipotence in his 5 errors of communication. Making the error of omnipotence is saying that I'm powerful enough to control your behaviors and your outcomes and your progress. It's not true. So I really appreciate you touching on that. I never really considered the idea of conflict resolution within oneself. And I don't even know if you said that or if you alluded to it or if it was just my brain connecting dots, but it's a really cool concept. And I'm going to have to chew on that for a little while. Where I wanted to go though, and I know we're getting a little long and maybe we need to wrap up or maybe not, but I wanted to ask you about the concept of forgiveness, because I hear shame and guilt, and those are 2 very important emotions among the 10 core emotions that we have. And for me, the resolution is forgiveness oftentimes to work through that. The concept of self-forgiveness is very complex, I think, and it requires a great deal of vulnerability when you look at oneself and that trinity of self-reflection, what was your trinity again? Self-appreciation.
Self-correction, self-appreciation, conflict resolution.
And conflict resolution. Yeah. So they all have to do with, and maybe this is where I connected the dots, is they have to do with self, right? Self-conflict resolution would be called self-forgiveness, right? I'm like, all right, I've beat myself up enough. I learned enough. I've made corrective action, and now I'm going to let it go. So talk a little bit about that and how that might apply in your life, extending to others, and then, how you deal with people who have wronged you, right?
So forgiveness is an interesting thing, and I think it's almost overstated. And what I mean by that is I think responsibility is far more important than forgiveness ever will be. Because if I were to look at my life and apply responsibility in the right moments at the right times, I wouldn't be in this place. Right. Well, obviously, this is a good place for me, is how I look at it.
I was like, I like you. I want you on this podcast.
Right. But like, if you look at it, I wouldn't have gone through the things that I've gone through. Mm-hmm. Right. I wouldn't, if I had applied responsibility to, right. We look at my dad, mm-hmm. right. The responsibility of my father to live and mm-hmm. teach me as a father, and put that responsibility on him. Like, what is there to forgive him within myself?
Right.
Right. And so, you continue that, right? The people that told me my father was going to hell and he was a sick man, I placed the responsibility on them for their ignorance, right?
It's really good. Yeah.
It's not necessarily about looking within yourself and, like if there's anything, forgive yourself for being ignorant, right? Like I think that's the only forgiveness that you need to provide yourself, is forgive yourself for being ignorant, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, I think this brushes up against the concept of intentionality, which is my favorite word in counseling, which is acting with a spirit of knowing why you do what you do, right? The spirit of intentionality is being in charge of your decisions such that you can reasonably predict the outcomes before you make the decision. That way you're not acting out of impulse or unconscious function or whatever. So if you can do that, you avoid having to apologize and then seeking forgiveness, and if everybody's doing it, you're taking full responsibility. The problem is developmentally, as children and then even into adulthood, we lack the awareness to be intentional with all our decisions. So I get that resonates. I like that.
Yeah. And it's that's why we'll never be able to solve our problems in the world, is because we're all at different phases of development. Correct. Right? Like kids will always provide a lot of problems because they're learning how to, function, right? They're learning how to, understand their emotions. They're learning what is right and wrong. They're pushing their boundaries because that's what kids do.
Yeah.
Right. I love like Jordan Peterson's statement of like, never interrupt kids when they're doing something dangerous carefully. Right. It's like you don't interrupt people when they're trying to do something important or dangerous or, functionally hard, but they're trying it carefully. Right. And I think a lot of parents, a lot of people, I shouldn't say parents, but a lot of people have struggles with that, is because they're so afraid of other people doing it wrong and the impact it'll have on them. And I say, don't let people get defeated, but then be the support structure that shows them that failure is fundamentally important to overcome, right? Especially for kids, right? Kids need that so much, is that your identity cannot be built out of winning 100% of the time, because that one time if you build it for so long and you become an adult and you've never lost, that one loss could be the thing that says, you know what, I'm going to my gun safe. And
it's distress tolerance. And profoundly, it's our own distress tolerance to watch others in distress. I mean, we see this in group settings all the time, where somebody will start to get tearful, and then another person will reach over and immediately put a hand on the thigh. And it's not about soothing the person, it's about taking yourself out of the presence of that person in distress. And it's not good when we jump in front of people's potential pain, because through pain we grow. I mean, pain is discomfort, pain is disequilibrium, pain is something out of your ego state that makes you grow. Any developmental theorist will tell you that that's how things grow and develop, is they have to push through whatever their homeostasis is into something else to hit another homeostasis. And if we just keep coddling and protecting and wrapping in bubble wrap, nobody's ever going to grow. So it's just a point well taken. And to that point, the reason I didn't want to jump into your processing there while you're telling the story is because I wanted you to be there, but then I wanted also the listening audience to be like, what are they doing? Like, why are they just letting this guy cry? Well, that's what we do for work. So it's a little, it makes it a little tough on a podcast.
It's,
with that said, I normally wouldn't have said holy s that you have the bullet still.
Yeah, it's, you know what it is? I think that is the most profound and important definition of empathy that you can ever
absolutely
like operate with, right? Because I've always kind of defined empathy as listening to understand, right? It's not listening to make you feel better. That's not the point, right? Empathy is to understand where you are. It's not the compassion or the care. It's just understanding. And that's why I very much focus on listening to understand. I also watch, but listening is far more important, because you need to understand the message that someone's trying to convey. And I think that's where, if I'm being honest, and the people that have come to me and struggled with therapy, I think that's where a lot of therapists might go wrong. I don't know, but this is just what this is just the response I get from people that tell me that their therapist sucked, right? And if you're listening to this and you are a therapist, maybe pay attention. But I think where people go wrong is if you are trying to make this person feel better or kind of guide their emotions, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe the goal isn't about telling them how to feel. It's allowing them to feel and creating the space for that. And then also informing them that's the point of this, right? When I have these conversations, one of the biggest things I do, it's the first thing I do, is in our consultation, the first thing I'm going to tell you is like, I can't help you. I can't fix you. I can't save your life. I can't solve all your problems, but I'll listen to you. And this space will be yours. You own this. I may provide it, but you own it, right? You pay the money, and you own this space where you can determine where this goes. You don't have to tell me shit, right? You can if you want to. I'm not going to judge you for it, because I've never been in your shoes and I don't know what it's like. I don't care how similar we are, right? And I put forth the understanding of the boundaries of how they can actually see me, right? I'm not doing anything for them. I'm not responsible for where they go with it. They are. And for the first time in their lives, just those statements are so outlandish to them that they don't know what to do with it. It's the first time that most of these people have ever been given an opportunity to actually just be themselves, right? It's where, you know, when I talk to them, it's often this divergence, right? There's a moment in your life, and this was 6 years old for me, where I noticed that who I wanted to be was not who I had to be, right? And that profoundness of that moment stayed with me even up until 25, 26.
I think that's probably what you offer. And I would disagree that you don't do anything for people. What you do is you do provide that space. We should be providing that space. That's what we're told in grad school all the time. Whatever happens when we get out, I have no idea. But it's okay to take credit too, right? It's okay to say, yeah, because of me, you have this space because I offered it and you accepted the invitation. It's a symbiotic relationship. So where sometimes we get wrapped around the axle, I think as healing professionals broadly, is we go too far to the end of the continuum that says, I'm not responsible for anything. It's like, no, absolutely you are. You're responsible for bringing the best knowledge, information, reflection, parameters, perspective that you can to this individual sitting across from you. Yeah. If you don't do that, at minimum, you're wasting their time, and at maximum, you're harming them because you're not paying attention, or you offer them something they don't need or could hurt them, right? So
or you're judging their choices.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I think you are offering that, and it's probably true that historically they have not had that opportunity. Maybe they had it and the timing was poor. Right. A lot of that going on, and
they just didn't recognize it.
Totally. Yeah, it's not the clinician's fault. It's nobody's fault. It's just bad timing. So I would invite you to consider the idea that because of the work you do take credit. You're not solving their problems for them. They are. I agree with that, but you're providing an avenue through which they can solve them that maybe doesn't exist anywhere else in their life. So that's okay. I mean, you can take credit for that. I think we get hung up too much on the whole ollie oxen free of it, because while we don't want to take blame for bad things happening or non-movement, we also don't want to take credit for people's progress. And then it's like, well, how are you different from the bartender then, or the hairstylist? It's like, no, you have a specialized set of skills that you spent many years and thousands of hours developing. Just because I did it in a formalized academic setting and then got the blessing from the state doesn't make me any different from you in my effectiveness. In fact, I would say that you're probably more effective than 2/3 of our profession anyway, just because you've put more effort into it and you don't hang your hat on the credentialism. It's funny, earlier you said something along the lines of like, you don't have the backing of all these people. I was like, yeah, that's funny. You think that the board backs us. The board is there. The board is there to make sure we don't screw up. There's no backing whatsoever.
No, don't get me started on NASW or the North Carolina, not NASW, but North Carolina licensure. I found out some stuff about them yesterday that they're cost me $500 to renew. Then 30 days later, take a test. It's not fun.
Wow.
Fair enough. I don't know what I don't know.
I think you would enjoy Christian Conte's book, though, if you want to pick it up. It's called Walking Through Anger. Conte is the last name, and he's been a longtime friend and mentor of mine. He was on the show some time ago. It's about $18 on Amazon. Anybody can read it. It's fantastic. It's his whole life's work on what he calls yield theory. And everything you say is perfectly aligned with that. I think you'd really enjoy it. So I recommend that. I recommend it to anybody.
I know we're going long, but I have a question, and you've alluded to it a few times, but you're saying in the moment, like you pulled the trigger or you pulled the gun from your head, and like said, you start bawling. You said you need to ask yourself what was the questions? What was that question that you needed to ask yourself the right way?
Well, it was 3 days of kind of self-isolation.
Did you sleep, by the way? Like, or were you just like wired and up and paranoid? Like, because I could see somebody really after that moment just like going crazy for a little while.
Well, you got to keep in mind, after my deployment, keep in mind from 6 years old on, I didn't have a healthy sleep schedule, right? Okay. I don't think I've really had a healthy sleep schedule until last year. Right.
Huh. I think you alluded to that in like about like you had nightmares and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was to the point of like 7 and 8 years old. I stopped sleeping because the nightmares and whether it was flashbacks, I don't remember them. Right. What I remember is that every time I got close to even, I think, dreaming, I would wake up. And
Fascinating.
so from 6 years old on, I would probably sleep 2 to 3 hours a night, and that was it, right? And once I came home from deployment, right, and I went to Fort Knox, it was maybe an hour max. You know, there was times where I would wake up 45 minutes later and I'd be like, here we go, right? Like, and so I've never until probably last year in 2020, I've never been able to sleep more than 4 hours in a row. And obviously there's a lot of PTSD within that, that affected me. Is just how my body kind of created those habits.
Can we hover here for a second? I want to know what changed last year.
I think I started understanding my own process. I
You
think
found peace.
yeah, absolutely. It was about finding that balance of what it, you know, I think honestly, social media and doing what I've done has
Yep.
allowed me to see myself from a direction that was fundamentally necessary. You know?
Wow. You can, yeah, it helped you connect it all. You made a gestalt of it. You put the pieces together.
Yep.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and
Thanks for indulging me in that. I do want to, answer Eddie's question.
yeah. And so after that moment, three days of thought, right? Like deep thought. It was, and I couldn't honestly tell you if it was just one question that made it come together, but questions like, you know, like what have I not talked about with people? What have I not said to people was fundamental, right? Because I had never talked about me wanting to die. I had never talked about what that guilt really meant to me, what that regret, or I never also talked about the moment I knew my dad wasn't coming home before he even left, right? I didn't have the words to express what that meant to me, right? And I didn't even do it after those 3 days right away. That was only really something that I think came together when I started writing Defy the Darkness, which was about 2 years after that. But what it came down to was asking, just pushing into that knowledge. I don't think it was one specific question. I think it was all of them. I think it was forcing myself to be honest of what have I not talked about, or why have I not talked, or, you know, just all of those deep, intrinsically focused questions on my own choices. If I had the opportunity, I probably would have named this book Choice Theory, because, you know, William Glasser took that name. Good job. But
Turns out it's already taken.
yeah, like it's a great book. You know, I read it, but you know, I really think that, like, when you really start to define your choices and focus on the understanding of what your choices have meant and where did they come from, like, we're the most unoriginal creature on the planet, right? Like, we are certainly pushed into innovation, and we have to, but so seldomly now that, like, every quote online is available to us, and we just repurpose it in our own fashion, right? Like, all the words are out there, like they're not new, right? And so it's really about diving into that innovation within yourself. And that's why I'm so focused on the self realization of who you are, and developing that knowledge and understanding where the original knowledge came from and how you processed it. You know, I took that guilt and processed it my own way with the factors that really mattered. And without the factors, that's the important part, I think, for me, is without the factors of understanding, like, my dad's trauma, because I didn't understand why he would do such a thing until I realized that he was physically abused by an alcoholic, massively abused, right? Like, I think he was the youngest, and he was the poster child of abuse, of alcoholism and abuse. And it was the moment when I started understanding trauma where I started actually realizing, like, he may have made this choice because he knew what was coming, right? He may have made this choice because he might have done the same thing if he wasn't careful, because he couldn't control himself. Right. And there were many other factors that kind of built that understanding that this wasn't selfish. There's a lot of this where he recognized where he was going. He recognized his own limitations. Were there better choices? Absolutely. Right. But he also knows in many ways that, just like me, that I was heading down a bad path, and I was thinking the very same thing. Like that moment, here's the interesting thing, is those 3 days, that's where I recognized that was the closest I've ever felt to my father. Is that in that moment, I started to realize how he might have felt. That was that empathy,
Yep.
that extreme empathy of like,
Yep.
Holy shit, I've become the very thing that I've been trying not to become. And even with all of my rules and all of my, integrity of trying to be this person that I don't want to be, I'm here. I'm in the same place.
Jung would call that a shadow projection.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Really good insight. So, this is Guns and Mental Health podcast. I mean, you're a gun owner, you're a competitive shooter, you're dealing with all this stuff. At any point, did it enter your head that, the stigma we talk about would possibly, threaten your rights?
Yeah, obviously. I mean,
And what was it like? What pushed you through that? Was it the I don't give a fuck attitude, or?
Well, I am a serving member in the military still. I'm Wisconsin National Guard, Army. Guns were my life at that time, right? Like when I deployed and I came home, well, so I'll backtrack a little bit. When I came home from basic training, the first thing I bought was a Remington 700. First thing I did, it was like a day later, I was like, I'm buying a gun. And the Army didn't teach me that well how to shoot. They taught me enough, right? And I talk about this in my book. And so I became obsessed with it because it was that hobby that allowed me to take my overthinking brain from all the trauma and all the PTSD and shut it off and challenge myself with something else. It was so important to me. And so when I dove into long range shooting, because that was my thing, I just loved it. It was Zen for me, right? It was that peace that I've always desired, but it was the wrong kind of peace. It was the outside peace. It was the almost instant gratification piece in a different way. And I became an instructor. Like I built my own course over the next like 5 or 6 years to a point where another God, what am I saying? A gun store that had a range contacted me, was like, hey, we'd like you to build us a class and teach this class here. And I was like, I already did. I just need to teach it, right? Let me share this with you. I'd love to. It was an honor for me. It was like, I had worked so hard. I've been to, SWAT designated marksman. I'd been to master gunner and got top gun. I had gotten my Chiefs 50 badge at that point at the Winston P. Wilson. It's a National Guard shooting competition. Like I've shot all over the country and I deployed before. So like, I just love guns, right? It was just something that I started to instruct right before then. And finally these guys brought me in and I started teaching there. I taught some long range courses there. And at the time it was the thing that mattered to me the most. It was like, someday I'm going to be a firearms instructor, on a grand scale. Like people are going to love what I do because I love what I do, right? It was just something I wanted to share with the world. And so when I looked at the potential that I had problems and thinking about talking about them, it wasn't just losing guns. If you had taken guns away from me at that time, you would have taken my whole life, like everything, because I looked at it so intrinsically as the thing that I taught myself. And that was very different for me because everything before that I had done for my father, because I had such a complex I wanted to make this man proud. And yet he wasn't there and he would never acknowledge it, right? Because he wasn't alive. And so when I started learning guns, it had nothing to do with my dad. It had everything to do with me. It was the one thing in my life that I was like, I did this. It was the
Mhm.
only self-appreciation that I gave myself. It was the only moment where I was like, I learned this. I did the work. And so when I got to sniper school this last year, the shooting was simple, right? I have been competing in precision rifle courses for precision rifle competitions for the past 4 or 5 years. So when I got to sniper school, I'm just like, this is easy, right? The stalking part was the hard part for me. And it has always come down to the identity of what guns meant to me, more than the guns themselves. But in a way, guns in a sense create identity. There's this
Sure.
there's this importance of being responsible for your life, being responsible for your own protection and your own safety, and the ability to go out and hunt, right? Like there's so many people that connect with that human nature to survive, and guns are a part of that. It's not just necessarily the gun itself, it's the identity that lives within what it means to own a gun and to have a gun and the ability to use that gun. So but for me, it was so intrinsic within my identity of, this is who I am, and if you take this away from me, I'm fucked, right? It's not, if you take this away from me, I'm going to hate you and the government and all this. Like, it's, I don't know what else to do at that point. That's what I've been living for,
Right.
and so it certainly stigmatized me to stay away from it, right? Stay away from mental health, stay away from the VA, stay away from the potential for having my PTSD actually diagnosed. I've never actually been diagnosed with PTSD. And I don't know if I really need to at this point. I understand it, right? And I feel very comfortable having done my own research and having looked within myself and recognizing what PTSD really is. I just don't fucking need a diagnosis to tell me what I have.
Right.
And I wish, in some ways, I wish people would think that more often and do their own research.
I will tell you that there's at least one person in this world, and he bears a striking resemblance to me and sounds a lot like my voice, who says diagnoses are only useful so far as you know what to do next. And it's like, great, your kid has ADHD. Now what?
Right.
Mhm.
What do you want to do with that? And it's not an identity.
Yeah. And in so many forms and fashions, I've heard from my clients, like, this diagnosis has been a death sentence to me, and for me, I look at that and I see my own understanding of that, of like, I know I didn't want to get diagnosed with PTSD. Like, I could, if I wanted to, I could go to the VA and say, I've been on 2 deployments, got PTSD. I could get disability for it. I'm not going to. I don't feel comfortable doing that, and if other people do, go for it, right? If it's something that still impacts you and affects you, go for it, right? I implore you to take advantage of the benefits that are available to you. For me, I feel like I've come to a place where I've healed from it. I've overcome it. Certainly there's habits there. Like, I'm still hyper vigilant, but I'm also still in the military. I have to be.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
It's okay to live in the yellow.
Yeah. I have to be, because that's what I do. That's my job. I'm now a sniper section leader, and I have to make sure I'm even more vigilant in a way, because we don't have support, right? Like, snipers are a different, and I'm learning this, snipers are a different breed. We have to be by nature. And it's that in itself has become kind of a learning opportunity for me that has been so interesting. But yeah, to answer your question, it was my identity, and it probably would have killed me in a different way if you had taken it away from me.
I will say
ahead.
this: I have more respect for you now, because I did not know you were a sniper. As a kid, I was obsessed with Carl's Hathcock, so that's just cool. And for those who don't know, he's like the number 1 sniper in America. He was in Vietnam. But just go read his book. His feats were like, it's just amazing.
What's his name and what's the book?
Carl's Hathcock.
Yeah.
And just look up white feather.
Yeah.
He actually wore a white feather in his cap to kind of like goad the Vietnamese, like, hey, I'm going to sit here with a actual white feather in my hat. You still can't kill me.
Well, this has been really enjoyable. and I am very, very glad to have met you. And I look forward to corresponding with you more in the future.
Absolutely.
I think there's some other stuff I want to ask you offline, for sure. And so I hope you're open to that. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask Mike Sodini's question he asks of all our guests, which is, how do you tend to your mental health?
You know, that's a really profound question. I have conversations with myself. It's simple, right? Like those, the processing of self-correction, self-appreciation, and conflict resolutions. I have those conversations with me, right? As crazy as that might sound, I think it's normal, right?
No, I think it means you're authentic.
Yeah,
I think you're not talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're doing what you're asking other people to do.
Yeah, I have, if you read my book or if you listen to it on Audible, I think the Audible is a lot better because I actually put more information in. I probably put 45 minutes worth of additional information because I didn't like how I wrote the book. I did the Audible afterwards. It's funny.
Walking Through Anger is the same way. The Audible version's better.
Yeah, I am definitely, or have been, a perfectionist, and I recognize the strengths of that and the weaknesses of it. And so I have those conversations on the daily of, should I doubt this? Should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I focus on this? I have those I overthink, right? But what I tell people is, if you're going to overthink in the right direction. And so I'm okay with overthinking. I love overthinking because it allows me to perceive the world and see how others perceive the world. It allows me to understand things that I never would have thought I could understand. And in a way, my overthinking is at peace in many ways because I've answered the questions that matter, and I don't continuously ask myself the same fucking questions, right? I don't sit here and walk myself through the same thing over and over and over again, because that's a waste of my fucking time. There are times where I can drive, or I can sit here in this office or in my bed, and I can stop thinking. It's a choice for me at this point. It didn't used to be. It was, I have to answer all of these questions. And now I understand that, I've created the responses that matter. And so I've functionally used my overthinking to create peace and balance within myself. And I also have built my value system to manage my mental health rather than just have these conversations. I have a rule system that says, my three biggest are, just off the top of my head, are integrity, empathy, and learning. Those three, I could spend a couple hours talking about how those three interact with each other, because there's a system of checks and balances just between those three, and my learning informs my integrity. My empathy informs my learning. My integrity informs my empathy. All of them interconnect and react to each other, because I have sat down and overthought the definitions of each of them, how they work within each other. And then I can add on, the things like fundamentally respecting people and how I look at trust and how I look at all these things. Like, I don't waste. Here's an interesting thing. And I think it's really important with mental health, is I look at trust a lot differently than most people, right? Because they haven't thought about the definition, right? I trust that people are going to do what they want to. I trust that people are going to do what's in their self-interest. And so that fundamentally changes my perception on how people interact and react. Because I know for a fact that how they reacted is probably how they wanted to, or have no idea they didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't waste time trying to determine how people react or whatever. I just don't waste time. I don't need to, because they either don't get it or they wanted to feel that way. And so that allows me to make decisions based on what they've done. It's simple.
I hope you're writing this stuff down and it's not just in your head. because it needs to be shared. I don't know if it's in video form. I haven't seen any of your videos, but that, what you just said there, and the Venn diagram of the integrity, empathy, and learning. I mean, those are profound concepts that could be sold for sure, but also just shared broadly to help move humanity forward. You know, so I really hope that you're cataloging this stuff. I don't, and it's at my peril. There's so much I wish I would have cataloged, but you know, only so many hours in the day, and I got stuff to do. But Eddie, closing thoughts.
First off, man, thank you for coming on. Even though I was part of this podcast, this is definitely one of the ones that I'm going to go back and re-listen to, because there's so much information that you put forth. There's so much stuff that I think I'm just going to try to incorporate in my own practice. Like I said, that you can always learn. That's, I mean, us as therapists, like if you're not learning, then you're not, what are you doing? So like, there's so much that, like, your story's powerful. And yeah, just thanks for coming on. I'm really glad that random TikTok I got at 1 a.m. or probably midnight led to this.
Yeah, but that's only 9 p.m. my time, so really it's quite early. Dylan, I did just order your book while you were talking there. I do want to read it. I had planned to read it, but the last month was a little chaotic in my life, but I am looking forward to it. The book is Defy the Darkness, and you can get it on Amazon. Your website is dylansessler.com. And you also have another one where you can sign up for like daily tips and insights and motivational comments too. What is that website, and how else can people find you?
So that's actually a text platform. So if you are local to the United States or even Canada, you can actually text the number 1-608-336-4480, and you'll become part of it's semi-automated, right? I make the messages every day. I type them up and I send them out. I send them out right now to about 1,700 people daily, right? And sometimes it's a quote, sometimes it's a thought of mine, right? Like in a sense, I am cataloging what I think, because I'm sharing what I think every day, just through my text platform. It's a way to connect with people that is so different. You know, it's something that I give positivity every day, and I give thought-provoking ideas every day, and people have blossomed from it, right? Like I've had people that have come to me on that platform and said, "Can you unsubscribe me? I think I have gained so much from this, and I don't need it anymore." And
that's
that,
so
like,
awesome.
Like when I look at that, I'm like, that's exactly what I want, right? Like, I don't want more people. I want more people to take from me and leave me behind in many regards.
That's Jake's famous saying, like, I want to work myself out of profession.
Absolutely. I think that's, I mean, we won't, right? Because there's always new humans being created that have new problems. But that's really what I think is so important about this, is that I don't want to be, you know, the person that you have to come to for the rest of your life because you lean on me. I just want to be a part of that journey if you need me, you know, if you need to help understand things. And I try and, on that platform specifically, I try and make it a little bit more focused. You know, it's different than TikTok. It's different than Instagram. It's different than my book even. And so there's so many different things that I put out there, and it's a daily thing. It's scheduled. So it's like, I will send out a text at 2:30 in the afternoon, and while I'm in a meeting, and I'll obviously have 1,700 people there. So I'm not always going to be able to respond, but I can, which is really, really fun in many regards. And it's really intriguing to me, is that people will respond with some of the most compassionate things and some of the most expressive things. They'll share their entire story with me, and I'm like, you know, it's wow. It's like this potential for creating trust just through social media is really powerful. And so, yeah, like if you text the number 1-608-336-4480, you can literally text me, and maybe I'll respond, maybe I won't. It depends on the day. I do try and respond though.
Well, thanks, man. Really appreciate it. So in closing, get a free and anonymous mental health screening at WTTA.org/love. Check out Dylan and his work. It's very powerful stuff. This has been an inspiration to me. I know Eddie's already shared that he's going to take away some of this stuff and put it into his own work. I can't wait to contact you again and ask about some of the other particulars that I'm super curious about. There's things percolating in my brain,
sure.
noggin head. So on behalf of our Walk the Talk America family, on behalf of our Zephyr Wellness family, thank you all for listening. Please share this around if you found it beneficial, and give us a rating and review wherever you get your podcast, because apparently they tell me that's how we help promote things. And as always, we wish you great mental wellness. Bye-bye. All right, we done.